Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica, but maybe for today's video I should say hey, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica. That is, we're talking about Crazy Taxi World Tour. Now that we have the announcement trailer, and now that we have some gameplay footage, I will say I am definitely cautious on what this thing is going to be. We're going to be getting into what I think is working, what I think isn't working, but honestly in the modern era, Sega is one of the most uneven developers, so either Crazy Taxi World Tour is going to be a 10 out of 10, or it's going to be a 5 out of 10. I really don't think Sega knows how to make a 7.5 or 8 out of 10 these days. But to say I'm excited about the idea of a new game in the Crazy Taxi franchise would be an understatement. I've done 7, count them 7, different Crazy Taxi videos in my 7 years on YouTube. Not all on the original, I reviewed all 3 games and talked about some prototypes that came out. And to say I love Sega arcade racing games and Dreamcast era vibes would be an understatement. It is my favorite era in gaming. So it's one of those things, once Sega announced that they were going to be working on a new Crazy Taxi, I was absolutely stoked, because even if Crazy Taxi 3, maybe not as good as the first 2, there's definitely a series in which there really isn't a quote-unquote bad game, and I'm really hoping Sega doesn't make a bad game in the end here, because it would probably kill a franchise that's barely existing outside of this new game. And I totally understand that there's been the entire generative AI controversy, and apparently Sega actually clarified that for saying that it was only for iterating on some concept art, and the full game will have nothing like that in it. But I'm sure if Sega's not telling the truth, people will find it about minute 1 and report on it. That's definitely something I don't want to see in a retail product either. I want real artists making real art from my video games. But I will say the trailer here, a mix of gameplay footage as well as some more pre-rendered story cinematics, definitely has the overall vibe and feel of Crazy Taxi down pat. The over-the-top ridiculous driving, the colorful kind of California vibes going on here. Maybe a little Yakuza here as well, because catching that giant shark made me think more Yakuza and less Crazy Taxi, but all of the best ways. But it's kind of when we actually got into the small gameplay footage that was put up on Twitter, which makes me think maybe this isn't going to feel the same as a Crazy Taxi game. And there really is something about the feel of Crazy Taxi in general that really drives the entire concept home. Would you tell me so far, what are your vibes on Crazy Taxi World Tour? I would be curious to see what you guys think. And obviously Sega's keeping some stuff hidden from us as well, because this is clearly the California coast in San Francisco, but with World Tour and the scene here, saying hope your passport is up to date, you're clearly going to be going to some other cities. Maybe it'll be London, maybe it'll be Paris, we don't know yet, but I'm sure we'll get some more information unless Sega said where we're going. I just haven't seen it quite yet. But again, the original Crazy Taxi is such an iconic game. It is a perfect game in my opinion. Yes, it's an arcade game that got ported home to Dreamcast, so the arcade gameplay is intact, and if you don't love an arcade racing game, you're not going to love Crazy Taxi. But for me, this is the type of game that you sit down and think you're going to play for 20-30 minutes, and somehow you're on your 4th or 5th hour just trying to do more runs and maximize that high score. And I want that overall sense of satisfaction in something like Crazy Taxi World Tour. And you can see here we are jumping in San Francisco the same way, so obviously at least a piece of this is going to be a remake or a reimagining of the original Crazy Taxi. And that is totally fine. It is such a good game. Giving me a modern version won't upset me. But watch how the cars hit things here, especially when your taxi hits other vehicles. That's something in the gameplay footage that has me slightly concerned. And again, if you know me and the channel, I am an eternal optimist. I want everything to be great. I want everyone to succeed and everyone to get the game that they're dreaming of. But there's just something about the footage that you're going to see in a moment that makes me think that maybe the developers here have kind of changed up the overall gameplay design. Because when you hit a car in Crazy Taxi, you have an impact, your car gets knocked around, and it becomes harder to drive because you're trying to get there faster. Then we move over to gameplay footage that was put up on Twitter by Sega Informant. You're going to see that when the taxi hits vehicles, it just pushes them out of the way and basically makes it seem like trying to drive a clean line might not be the most important thing in the world. Now I'm also going to try to do a soundtrack sample here, but I'm assuming it's going to get cut up, so you're either going to listen to 45 seconds of fun or 45 seconds of silence. But watch these cars hit here. I will do a zoom in just a moment. You just push them out of the way, and there really isn't any stakes or impact when you actually hit the vehicles. And that's something that was always important in the original Crazy Taxi. When you made a mistake, when you hit another car, it cost you time and it had repercussions. Here you're basically just making them fly out of the way, and if that's how the entire game plays, honestly, I think that would be a letdown, at least to me personally. Let's try and see if you can get any sort of the actual soundtrack here, and I'll be right back after you heard music or silence.
Ready? Go!
So it's fun that the Offspring is back and is definitely delivering the classic Crazy Taxi vibes that we all know, love, and remember. But as you saw here on the actual larger scale footage, and again, sorry for the quality, it's just the best that is available. I just don't like the idea of there not being any sort of impact between your vehicle and objects in the world. Because if that's the case, you can just basically point it straight and give her, for lack of a better term, and just plow through traffic and make your way to wherever you want to go. Where in the original Crazy Taxi 2 and 3, that just wasn't the case. You'll see here the car gets bobbled around and it has a much better sense of physics. Now again, I'm not controlling this test footage, so it might be one of those things. Maybe it won't matter all that much in the end, but if all you need to do is step on the gas and drive forward and push cars out of your way, that would be something that I think would be to the detriment to the franchise. Because you'll see here, as we drift, those cars basically just fly completely out of the way, like they don't exist whatsoever. And that is not realistic, even in a game that's not meant for realism. I just think it would make the game too easy, but that really is kind of what I'm here to talk about. What I want to see out of Crazy Taxi 3, what I'm impressed by so far, and what worries me. But you leave me a comment down below and you tell me, cars that you could just basically drive through without any impact, how do you kind of feel about that one? Then moving over to Crazy Taxi 3 High Roller, my least favorite in the franchise, but still a very good game. I do love the fact that Crazy Taxi is coming back, and again, I want Sega to be successful with this. A successful Crazy Taxi World Tour means we might see a sequel to that game, and maybe before you know it, we'll actually have 6 mainline Crazy Taxi games, not 3 right now with a 4th on the way. But that is why I say I'm an eternal optimist. The more successful these games are, the more chances we have of actually seeing new ones. Because let's be entirely honest, Sega absolutely mismanages the ever-loving hell out of their back catalog. People want them to release compilations for games that have never left the arcades, and they just don't do it whatsoever. So giving us something like Crazy Taxi World Tour is a nod to classic Sega fans and classic Sega hardware and games that they still remember that people appreciate and love these franchises. So that's why I want something like this to be able to be successful, because if it isn't, Sega's basically going to think Crazy Taxi is a dead franchise, we're never going to revive it again. And there is just so much fun. I grew up with these games. A lot of you watching grew up with them. We played them with our friends, screaming and yelling and hollering, trying to do speed runs and get the highest score in the least amount of time possible. And that's what I want to see all over again. And I'm highly assuming with the World Tour moniker, there might be some sort of online component going on as well. At least hopefully, because I'd love to race with my friends and even strangers online, trying to compete in the same map to get a higher fare in the amount time set. But it's one of those things, I just don't know what we're supposed to expect here, and that really is the hard part about being a Sega fan. You kind of get on that classic Sega Cycle, you get excited about an announcement, then they show some preview footage and you kind of get some misgivings and concerns. Then when the game comes out, either you realize that those concerns are for naught, or you realize the game that you got was not the game you wanted. And I kind of feel like Crazy Taxi World Tour right now is straddling that overall. Is it going to be amazing, or is it going to be a disappointment scenario? Because for every single game that Sega releases that is amazing, they do something like partner with Forever Entertainment and give us the House of the Dead and House of the Dead 2 remakes, which are some of the worst games I have ever played as far as remakes or reimaginings are concerned. And that is why just some days it's hard to be a Sega fan. You love the company, but you always question their decisions. I would say so many times in comments on Sega videos, people just always say they have no idea what the hell Sega's doing. And some days I feel like Sega doesn't have any idea what they're doing either. And with the whole generative AI controversy on the announcement on this, they basically fumbled the football on explaining why they used it in the first place, and then had to backtrack and make people understand more clearly what was going on. And again, I am a firm stance believer that in paid games, I don't want to see any generative AI whatsoever. I want real artists working with whatever medium they have in front of them to be able to produce the art for the game. Would you tell me down below if that really matters to you or not? I always say on the channel, I give you guys my opinion, I allow you to have yours, and whatever it is you feel comfortable with. I'm not trying to yell at you and convince you otherwise, it's totally cool with me. But I am still excited that we're getting a Crazy Taxi game in the modern era. I just hope it's every bit as good as I need it to be. And that really is the hard part about hype and expectations. A lot of times you build something up in your mind that it can never live up to. So I'm trying to temper my expectations here. But the overall moving cars out of the way with no momentum really makes me think that this might be a Crazy Taxi for a quote-unquote modern era, and not one that's going to be as much fun for us classic retro gamers. But short of that, hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.